This is Game On, discussing the biggest games and all the latest sports news with Johnny Montalbano and Hank Indictor on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
It's showtime, folks. It's episode 52 of Game On here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. I'm Johnny Montalbano. Hank, good to see you, my friend. How you doing? Well, I'm afraid to ask you how you doing, but how are you doing?
I think I'm okay. I'm alive. I'm sitting in my the chair in my basement. I'm talking sports with you. I'm on episode 52 of Game On. Oh, who am I kidding? I'm extremely disappointed and let down by the New York Rangers again, but that is a rant that you will hear from me later on the show. And boy, am I going to have to sharpen that axe.
Stay tuned, folks. We're going to be on Hank Rant Alert. That'll be coming up later on in the episode, but it is good to see you, Hank. And yeah, we definitely still have a lot to get to.
Johnny, fair warning, I have multiple rants. There's been a lot of things driving me nuts this past week.
Yeah, I can tell you firsthand.
Boys in blue on skates.
Yep, I can tell you firsthand. When we were setting up to prep for the show, that was a warning for sure. But yeah, we will get to that and so much more here over the course of the episode. But it is good to see you, Hank, here as we begin the month of May, and another month. Brother. Yep. Another month, another major amount of sports stuff to discuss. And folks, we want to hear from you as well. So several ways for you to get aboard. Follow us across our social media platforms. We're on Facebook and Twitter at GameOnETB. We're on Instagram at GameOn_ETB. Of course, check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network, where if you like today's episode, leave us a like. If you're new, hit that subscribe button. And as always, have your notifications set so you know when all of our programming is going to be out there. Not only us here at Game On, but NBA Outsiders, Fruity Cereal, all that fine stuff here over on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network, and our personal handles scrolling on the bottom of your screen there, and of course right below our namesake as well. As I said, a lot to get to over the course of the show here today, folks. We're going to get to those Rangers in the Stanley Cup playoffs, which have just been, the Stanley Cup and the NBA have been absolutely incredible, upsetting, all that, any adjective you want to use. So we're going to get to the NBA, we're going to get to the NHL, but Hank, we have to get it going here with the football, the NFL draft, which we were on the air for 4.5 hours last Thursday. Was truly incredible. We're going to get into all the draft stuff here, but when we started last Thursday, I had two things I was looking forward to seeing, and that was, number one, who were the Carolina Panthers going to take at number one? Because all the talk over the last 6 weeks or so leading into Thursday night was who would be Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, even Anthony Richardson's name had come along. There was even a story from Pro Football Talk and Mike Florio that there was even a possibility of Will Levis being drafted at number one. So that was topic number one. Number two, the Arizona Cardinals with the third overall pick. What were they going to do with it? Now, again, a situation where we heard a lot of stories, a lot of reports, including the day of, that they were actively shopping that third pick. And I don't think it was a surprise that they ended up trading that pick, but it was who got that third pick to who. And that was the Houston Texans, number two. So they ended up with the second and third picks, which, by the way, fun fact, that is only there's only the third time that a team had two out of the first three picks to themselves. And it's very difficult to do. So you see why it's such a rare thing. But we'll go through the whole draft order and anything. But at the end of the day, you see that Bryce Young from Alabama at number one. CJ Stroud goes to Houston at two. The Texans trade up to get Will Anderson from Bama at number three. And Anthony Richardson at four. And so many other things to talk about. But Hank, when you look at this draft, which you were on with us for a little bit on Thursday, what is your overall thoughts? And going through the draft in general, who were your big winners and losers of draft weekend?
So for the biggest winners and losers, I would say it's simply this. There are the teams from the Keystone State. There are plenty of other teams in the mid background that had solid, if unspectacular, drafts. And then there's 50 feet of crap, to paraphrase what Billy Beane said in Moneyball. And then you've got teams like the Jets. You've got teams like the Falcons. And good Lord, the Detroit Lions. Oy vey. Dan Campbell, I loved you. I thought you were doing a good job changing the culture. What happened, buddy? Why on earth would you take a running back when you already splurged on David Montgomery, who I don't even think was that good of an acquisition, but that's neither here nor there, and when you had DeAndre Swift? And to top it all off, you trade DeAndre Swift to the Philadelphia Eagles for basically a big bag of Doritos. And not to mention, the Jack Campbell pick was bad. And didn't they take a tight end later on that also looked really bad or something like that?
I believe so, yeah.
And I'm sorry, let me continue my rant for a bit.
Yeah, first one of many.
Atlanta Falcons. Bijan Robinson with the 8th pick? Really? Why? Why on earth would you take a running back that high? If you're going to do so, he had better be either Adrian Peterson, Walter Payton, Emmitt Smith, Barry Sanders, or the greatest of all time, Jim Brown. Honey Bijan Mustard Robinson is nowhere close to either of those guys. And I don't know what they're doing here. And as far as the Jets go, I mean, look, it's bad enough that you kind of bet the farm on geriatric Aaron Rodgers, but then you took Will McDonald with that first round pick. Really? However, that's enough of my bashing. I'll get to the Jets a little bit later. Let's talk about the two Pennsylvania teams. Omar, there's a reason why my buddy Dom, who I went to college with, he's a big Steelers fan. There's a reason why he has a new name for the Pittsburgh Steelers GM. And you want to know what that name is? Omar the Con Artist. Because he made an incredible trade to get that tight end. He took the offensive tackle from Wisconsin. And then Joey Porter Jr. was somehow available. Incredible. Excellent work. And then we go to the Philadelphia Eagles. And oh my gosh, what a haul they got. You took Jalen Carter, who, now don't get me wrong, I understand that Jalen Carter has had his issues. I get it. But look at that defensive line. That very well might be the Reggie White and Jerome Brown 2.0. What they just did there. And you took Nolan Smith too, another Georgia guy. That is mad smart. And Johnny, you know I've told you many times that Georgia is pretty much a factory when it comes to football talent. No?
Especially on the defensive end. The defensive side, yep.
The Kelly Ringo in the 4th round? What? Somehow that guy was available, yet who was it that took Weatherspoon at number 5? The guy from Illinois.
That would be Seattle. Devin Witherspoon, yeah.
From the film that I've watched and what I've researched, I'm sorry. I think Ringo might be even better than Witherspoon. I know that might sound like a reach, but I'm sorry. Look at the program that he's in. Georgia produces a lot of these insane athletes. He absolutely ran circles in this draft. And I don't even think he made a mistake. And like I said, you basically traded a bag of chips for DeAndre Swift.
Yeah.
Johnny, I am absolutely terrified to have to face this team twice. But can I also talk about the Giants real quick?
Yeah, absolutely, because I want to bring them up as well.
I thought Joe Shane did a good job, and I have to give him credit where credit is due. Would Deonte Banks have been would Deonte Banks have necessarily been my first choice at cornerback? Not necessarily, but at the same time, if you look on film on him, he's a guy that I think could very well improve their secondary. And if you really paid attention to the Giants and the draft boards, it seemed to me like he was a guy that they were really high on. It seems to me like that's a guy who can really fit Wink Martindale's system. And it seems to me that they really never had any interest in Joey Porter Jr. too, because I don't think he really fit their scheme. And I think you really need to factor that in when you're going to take a cornerback in the first round. So honestly, I think that's a good pick. John Michael Schmitz, the center from Minnesota, that's an absolute steal. And the fact that he has a wrestling background, I actually really like that, because that matters more than you really think. It shows you how really strong they are.
Yeah.
And taking Jalen Hyatt too, again, are you kidding me? You got that guy in the third round. And I also think Eric Gray was another solid under the radar pick. I think if you have him and Saquon complementing each other, I think this is definitely an improved Giants roster for sure.
So I followed Jalen Hyatt a lot watching Tennessee last season, and I follow a lot of these guys because I love watching college football. But
sure,
so the Banks move, the first guy I really wanted for the Giants, if he was there, was the kid from USC, Addison, but he went to Minnesota. But when he wasn't there, and I thought it was kind of interesting that, and we were on at the time with the Giants trading up one, giving up 3 pick slot with Jacksonville to get Deonte Banks. I like him a lot. He's somebody the Giants needed in the secondary. He's fast, which is also something that you really need, especially with a secondary player, especially with these kind of the way that the NFL's played now. So solid pickup from the Giants there in the first round. And then Jalen Hyatt, the fact that he was still out there that late, and you saw the Giants traded up again for that, I love it. I watched Jalen Hyatt a lot there in Tennessee, and he is a very good receiver. So I like him a lot. I think another very solid pickup. And let's also remember, too, last season, with who the Giants drafted and when they did, remember, Robinson, the kid from Michigan in the second round last year, who Wan'Dale Robinson, people didn't like the move at first. They were kind of questioning it. He actually played really well up until the time when he got hurt. Dan Bellinger, the tight end, was a 4th-round pick, if I remember correctly. And he flourished last year. He was fantastic. And now you have him to go along with Waller. So I think the Giants did have a solid draft. Now, as far as my winners and losers go, I think you and I are kind of sharing a brain here, because what Philadelphia was able to do, and I said this in real time, the fact that they moved up the 9th spot ahead of Chicago, and you knew when they made that move that was for Jalen Carter. I mean, you knew that when they made that move, you said, all right, you knew that was going to be the case, because it looked like that's who the Bears were targeting, but the Eagles moved up to get him. And then later on, the trade for Swift to pretty much a solid pickup. Swift was a pretty good player there in Detroit last season. Now he wasn't getting really a bulk of the carries. There was really more Jamal Williams, who they lost in the offseason to the Saints. And that's where one of the interesting things with the Lions are now, that they don't have Swift and they don't have Williams anymore. And they replaced him with getting Gibbs from Alabama at 12, which I think was a reach. But you have that. And also remember, the Lions are going to be down 4 guys to start the season because of the gambling policy, because of the gambling suspension. So yeah, I think the Lions, I'm not exactly sure what they're doing. I think really they'd be if Jared Goff can duplicate what he did last season, because they still definitely do have enough talent. I mean, I still think they have one of the best connections in football to Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I still think they could do that. Now the fact that the Packers are going to be basically in rebuild mode now post Aaron Rodgers, I think helps too. But yeah, what else? Steelers, I mean, moving up to 14 to get that offensive tackle was great.
Broderick Jones, by the way, is his name. I'm
Broderick-
sorry, I was blanking on his name before.
Yeah,
that.
Broderick Jones. Yep, the offensive tackle. Smart
And
pick
then
again.
Can I also bring up this fact about the Joey Porter trade? This was essentially the pick that they got in the Chase Claypool trade. And I'm sorry, but if you're Chicago, that trade just keeps on getting worse and worse by the day.
Yeah.
Like, and like I said, I still don't know how on earth Joey Porter was even still available at round 2. I thought for sure he was going to be gone by the end of day 1.
Yeah. No, that's all true. A couple of other names that we had mentioned on draft night that got taken later on.
Also, Darnell Washington. I'm sorry. Sorry to cut you off. That's
fine.
Darnell Washington, tight end from Georgia.
Yep. And again, another Georgia guy.
And you got him in round 4.
Yeah.
Again, the con artist.
Now, let me play one devil's advocate. Actually, I'm gonna push back on two things. I like the fact that the Lions drafted Hendon Hooker to be behind Jared Goff, because two names that I had brought up a lot during the draft show on Thursday night were Hendon Hooker and Will Levis. To me, guys that were not going to start week 1. They're still coming back from the torn ACL, even though they say he could be ready by week 1. I think it's a solid guy to have as backup behind Jared Goff there in Detroit. And then Will Levis did get traded up. The Titans did trade up to get him over the weekend. Again, I think not a bad fit there in Tennessee behind Tannehill. Again, we don't really know how many more days Tannehill's going to have down there. So I think to be behind him, I think is solid there from Tennessee's side. We also saw that Stetson Bennett, a name that had been discussed a lot in the offseason, who won the national championship with Georgia. The Rams ended up taking him with, we saw that Max Duggan from TCU got taken very late. So those were all the other quarterbacks. But yeah, all in all, at the end of the day, I think you and I are kind of sharing a brain on that. Now, as far as the Jets go, because they were another team talked about a lot because of the whole Aaron Rodgers thing, I actually didn't mind them not knowing who they got there at 15, which was Will McDonald, the edge from Iowa State, because that's just the case of the Jets once again continuing to shore up their defense. And one of the things, if you did not want to see the Jets do at 15, and I said this on the show Thursday night, is you did not want them to reach. And to me, age of lineman. Now, maybe you could put the whole conspiracy that Bill Belichick wanted to stick it to the Jets again by allowing the Steelers to trade up at 14 and get Broderick Jones. But at the end of the day, I think the Jets did the smart thing by getting the edge and then addressing needs later on. We also saw them get Billy Turner, former offensive lineman with the Packers, and with Nathaniel Hackett there in Denver. So that's a pickup they could get. But I mean, the team for the Jets is pretty much there. As long as their offensive line is there, let's have a chance to be playoff bound. I just think the biggest question mark with them is going to be, can Aaron Rodgers adjust to the AFC East? Because everybody's thinking that's a lock, and I'm not ready to go there just yet, especially when you look at their schedule, which it looks like is going to be, from all reports, next Thursday, February 11th is going to be when the schedule is going to be released. And the Jets have a very challenging schedule, at least on paper, with the teams they're facing. So, but even so, can Aaron Rodgers give them 2 to 3 more wins? It's certainly possible, but I just don't know. He had a very favorable route there in Green Bay, not taking anything away, but now he has to do this in a very challenging, not only division, but conference there in the AFC. So that's what I would say regarding the Jets pick there at 15. And the Lions, I mean, I like them with Hendon Hooker. Some of the things are questionable, but now the Green Bay really is not that much of a factor. The Bears are still rebuilding. They could still be potentially that second best team there in the NFC North. It just pains me, though, because the Eagles definitely, there were some question marks with them. They lost some coordinators. They lost some defensive players. Miles Sanders went to Carolina. And they replaced how they were able to replace them. It's just give how I can't stand him, but I got to give Howie Roseman there and credit because what he's able to do there is quite remarkable.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest with you. I think the Eagles, if the Eagles don't go back to the Super Bowl, and I'm being dead serious right here. This is coming from a hardcore Giants fan who has hated the Eagles for as long as he can remember and was in attendance when Deshaun Jackson did we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
If the Eagles don't return to the Super Bowl, something went horribly wrong.
Well, you never know. Injuries.
I know it's a little too early, but trust me, with all the talent that's on the roster, with the fact that they were still able to improve their roster, the fact that they were able to fleece the Lions out of DeAndre Swift, with the fact that they had such an excellent draft and have a defensive line that's probably going to be just as good as it was a year ago. Johnny, I would be, and like I said, name me a better quarterback in the NFC than Jalen Hurts.
I cannot tell you right now there is one because whoever else is there is not really proven. I don't think Kirk Cousins is, even though he's probably got a better connection with Justin Jefferson.
Like
Brock
I just
Purdy
said,
hasn't done
Kirk
it
Cousins is
consistently
mid.
enough. So no, there really isn't anybody.
Like I just said, Kirk Cousins, mid.
Yeah, but
So
I division though.
No, I don't see it.
I think what helps, Hank, you know what helps too with Philadelphia? One other thing there with Hurts, the contract is so favorable because there's not any major cap hits early on in that deal. So that's really good. Dallas, to me, I don't think did anything to really say that they're ready to take the next step.
Oh,
so it's not that much. If you think about it, we could sit here right now, and again, this is only May, but we could sit here right now and say that the Giants could potentially be the second best team in the NFC East.
That, in my opinion, is not a reach at all. I think if it wasn't for the Philadelphia Eagles, I would probably be talking about praising the Giants a lot. But again, I'm not complaining about what Joe Shane did in this draft. I really liked what he did with the first 3 picks, getting Banks, getting that center from Minnesota, and shout out to my buddy Moshman, who's a big Minnesota Gophers fan. He was pretty excited about that. And then obviously getting Hyatt. That's a win. It may not have been, they may not have necessarily gotten the best players, but I think they fit the roster pretty well. It's a huge victory. And you want to know what's funny? I got to give Tom a bit of a shout out because he made a video before the draft saying that Banks would be a perfect fit. So
yeah,
from Big Blue Avenue, of course. I'm talking
absolutely about. Yeah, solid stuff there. I was following him all along. We were messaging back and forth on draft night, and I went out Friday night, and they had the draft on the board. Somebody came up to me and said, the Giants are ready to pick here in the 3rd round. And when I saw Jalen Hyatt's name picked, I could not believe he was actually still out there. And I love the kid. I mean, remember the Giants hit on their 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round guys last season. So if they do that again this year, then there's no question they could go back to where they were last season for sure. Because were they most last year? No. Were they the best coached team of anybody in the league last year? I'd say absolutely, right at the top. And the one other team I want to focus on before we move on is Carolina, because there was a lot of talk with them either taking Bryce Young or possibly C.J. Stroud or even Anthony Richardson's name coming up. But Young, which I think is still very solid. I think he's gonna do all right. But you look at Young, if he starts week 1 and if he does what they're projecting him to do, you look at that roster and you look at the talent that's there and you look at the rest of that division, it is not a reach to say that the Carolina Panthers could be winning the NFC South next season. Because to me, Atlanta's still in rebuild, right? Because Atlanta's still in rebuild mode, and we don't know what they're doing with Bijan Robinson when they got great running back play last year. We don't know about the Saints are the wild card in all this because, like I said, they did bring in Jamal Williams. They do have Alvin Kamara. They do have Chris Olave, who they drafted last year. But what are the Saints really? I mean, they could be a 9-win team. They could be a 6-win team. And the Bucks, I just don't trust Baker Mayfield. I mean, I know he's going to be out there on the revenge tour, but I just don't trust Baker Mayfield down there in Tampa. So if everybody plays their cards right, and they did bring in Frank Reich, remember too, to be the head coach, I think Carolina's on track to win the NFC South next season. Especially this is a team that was playing for that possibility into Week 17 last year. And they improved that roster offensively, defensively. The makings are there for Carolina as long as the pieces come together.
Can I also piggyback off of that?
Yeah.
Are we really sure that the Bears won that trade for the number 1 pick?
Well, when you look at it, I mean, DJ Moore is there, but the fact that they also then took that pick and then traded down again, and forgive me for forgetting who they took at 10. It was Darnell Wright, the offensive tackle from Tennessee. So yes. Protection for Justin Fields, which I think is very, very, very important. No, I don't think you're crazy to say that. I mean, you can make the case that both teams won that trade, but because if Carolina gets their franchise QB out of this, if Bryce Young is the real deal, if he does help them out, then it's a winner for them because that's been their missing piece.
Both teams winning, did they though?
Well, it depends. If Bryce Young's the answer, then absolutely.
Yeah, no, I'm going against the grain. I honestly, the more I really think about it, I really think Carolina won that trade. Mm-hmm. I really do. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. Chicago really didn't get that much compared to like other trades for number 1. Honestly, if you really look back at it, look at that compared to the RG3 trade.
Or even I'll tell you even too, look at what happened with the Texans trading up to 3 with the Cardinals.
Which, by the way, brings me to my next point.
Yeah.
I have a feeling Ryan Poles is going to be out of a job within the next few years. Because I'm sorry, I mentioned this trade as being saying that the Panthers probably won this. Remember, this is the same guy that practically got Chase Claypool and gave up what turned out to be Joey Porter Jr.
Yeah.
And not to mention, he gave up Roquan Smith to the Ravens for practically a bag of chips.
You have a couple defensive players there last season. Yeah.
Yikes. That's not good.
Yeah.
And poor Justin Fields. That's all I got to say.
Well, I mean, they believe in Fields, though.
No, they do. I think he's talented, but what do I always say? Teams matter when it comes to the NFL draft.
Yep. Well, now he's got 2 receivers there.
Imagine, because like I say, I often say, and Nick could probably vouch for me on this too. What if the Jets had taken Josh Allen and or Patrick Mahomes? Would they necessarily be successful? I don't know.
Don't know. It's you can't really compare the two.
And by contrast, I could easily see Sam Darnold improving should he get a shot in San Francisco. Like, there's a reason people were high on him beforehand, and you put him in a Kyle Shanahan offense, they could be sneaky good if you have Sam Darnold. Like, I know that sounds like a crazy take, but
it's not crazy. Look what he did in Carolina.
Yeah.
Didn't commit any mistakes. I mean, he had a couple of gaffes in Week 17 against the Bucks, but he didn't make any mistakes. And Carolina passed the test and survived to Week 17. And he may have to start there in San Francisco because we don't know if Brock Purdy's going to be ready to start the year.
Yeah. No, I agree. And
what
about Trey Lance?
We don't know what Trey Lance
can be anything. He could even be a mystery box.
That's right. He can be. We're going to have to get that as a sound effect by next football season. A sound bite. But yeah, I agree. That's all fair. And you know what? They may need Sam Darnold to start there in San Francisco start of the year because we don't know if if he's going to have to start there.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't know if Mr. Purdy's going to be ready for the start of the season, especially with how late he had his elbow surgery. So, ultimately, though, we talk about that on the field, and we will. 3 months we'll have preseason. 4 months we'll have the start of the regular season. The one other thing I'll mention with this too was, and I know we don't really have a graphic for it, but the talk about Lamar Jackson on draft day signs that massive contract with the Ravens. They extend him. He announces it on his social media. And my thought was, this was really the last straw for the Ravens side, because if they offered him this deal and he said no, my gut tells me that they would have traded him on draft night.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. So Lamar gets that huge, massive deal. Now he is the highest paid quarterback. So yes, Jalen Hurts, his title, crowning him the highest paid in the league, lasted about a little over a week, and now it's Lamar, and eventually it'll be Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert, because they're going to be next.
Well, I'm just going to say this too with regards to Lamar Jackson. Are we sure I was crazy for thinking that the Giants did the right thing by giving Daniel Jones that contract? Johnny, I think you know this. Nick knows this too. I am not that high on Lamar Jackson whatsoever. I felt that he peaked in 2019, and I think he was propped up by the Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman coaching tandem, and now Greg Roman's no longer with the Ravens coaching staff, and people somehow thought that guy was a problem. Haven't you learned that wasn't exactly the case in San Francisco when he propped up Colin Kaepernick? And now you're paying him all this money, and this is a guy that for the past 2 years has been MIA health-wise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been on record as saying this. You know what? You could look at his first few years, and you can definitely bring that into account, but you cannot overlook the last 2 years either. You could look at both things, but he's going to be out there to prove it. And you know what? If you're Harbaugh, you better hope that this work. Giving all that money to Lamar, giving all that money for 1 year to OBJ. I mean, I get they drafted Flowers, but the wide receiver from Boston College, Zay Flowers, and I know they brought in Nelson Aguilar, but if this doesn't work, then Harbaugh is going to be out of a job too, and then Lamar is going to have to learn a totally different system in a division that still got the Bengals, still has the Steelers, who were very sneaky last year, and you can make the case that they got better, and still has the Browns, who could every now and then spoil somebody. This was desperation, an act of desperation at its purest form. And as far as we talked about with Daniel Jones, the Giants handled that the right way, 100%. Him and Saquon. And if Saquon doesn't want to report, it's his loss.
And
he needs the
Giants. What?
The Giants don't need him.
And like I said, I really like the 5th round running back pick the Giants made.
Yeah. And,
are we really sure would losing Saquon really be the worst thing in the world?
No. And it pains me to say that, but it really is not.
It pains me to say that too, because I like the guy. He's an incredible athlete and just good all around team player. But at the same time, what I've said about running backs. Be careful who you invest in. And I'm not saying running backs can't help you win games. Believe me, there have been moments where you've needed a really good running back performance to win. But at the same time, This isn't the 90s anymore where you could rely on a strong running game to win games. This is a quarterback's league. The time, as Bob Dylan said, the times they are changing.
Sure. I mean, you do still need, though, to balance the quarterback play and your running backs. I mean, even the Kansas City Chiefs this year, when they won the Super Bowl, had enough running back play to be successful. Hank,
Also,
I've
how
thrown
many
this.
teams have won? How many teams within the last decade have won in the Super Bowl with a star running back?
A star running back. Not many. Zero.
Yeah.
I've said this. I've thrown this proposal out too. If the Giants get rid of Barkley, or if he does not want to play, I'm calling up Zeke. Bringing him in for 1 year. What's the risk? 1 year,
Feed Zeke.
right? I mean, I don't need to match the production from Barkley. I just need enough production.
Mm-hmm.
The Giants system can flourish with just enough running back play. They don't need total running back play. They just need enough of it. So
I agree.
that's what we'll find out here in the next couple of months. But just a very fun draft, a very interesting draft, and we'll find out now how all these players produce as we start getting closer with OTAs and training camps. And then before you know it, preseason football, the Jets and the Browns open up Hall of Fame game in 3 months. And then before you know it, we're back at it again with another football season. But that's for down the road. We want to get the winter sports done with first, and that's what we're going to transition into next. And we're going to save Hank's hockey rants for just a little bit here, because we're going to transition to the NBA, which, just like the Stanley Cup playoffs, have had upsets, have had a little bit of everything. I mean, if you think about it, Hank, here we are sitting with an 8 seed beating a 1 seed, which is extremely rare in the NBA. In hockey, that happens, because it's more likely to happen in hockey, but in the NBA. But you look at the Miami Heat, what they've done, with Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry getting past Giannis and the Bucks, which I don't think many of us saw coming. Now, that being said to me, and I say this as a Knicks fan, because as the Knicks are in the process of playing the Heat right now, and we saw that we saw it on Sunday afternoon. To me, Hank, the Miami Heat are an 8th seed in number only. This is actually a very dangerous team. And remember, they had to win a play-in game to get to this point, and then they took care of the Bucks, pretty handily. And second half of game 1, I mean, with a banged up Jimmy Butler, you saw the likes of like Kyle Lowry and everybody step up in a big way, and the Knicks could not hit a shot in the second half of the game. Jalen Brunson was off pretty much the entire game, and I appreciate the fact that after the game, he shows leadership and admits that he did not play well. Of course, now you find out that he's a little bit banged up, along with Julius Randle. See, the other thing too is, besides the fact that Knicks were not hitting the shots, Hank, if you go back and look at game 1, I think you have to have a bigger rotation than just 8 players. I think you've got to get more guys involved here if you're the Knicks. I mean, otherwise these guys are going to start getting exposed, because for most of them, this is kind of uncharted territory.
Yeah, absolutely. And with regards to the Miami Heat, can I piggyback off what you were saying about them being an 8 seed in name only? That Miami Heat team has a bit of a 2007 Warriors-like feel to me, if you know what I mean. Remember how they were an 8 seed, but that was a really loaded Western Conference, and they probably would have been like right in the middle in any other year. I think people underestimate the Miami Heat because you don't realize that Jimmy Butler is the type of guy that always elevates his game come playoff time. And, it makes sense that he would go off with the 56-point game, and then would he have 42 in the closing game of that Milwaukee series? And even when he's hurt, he's the type of player that they say, you got to beware of a wounded animal, and wounded animals are dangerous. And that's certainly the case with Jimmy Butler. And look, I'm no Miami Heat fan, but I've always been an admirer of his game, so to speak. So he's the reason why the Miami Heat scare me.
I agree. And also, Miami's been through this too before. Kyle Lowry's also a nice addition to go along with that team. Yeah, Miami scares me. And if you're the Knicks here, I mean, you need Julius Randle healthy. You need Jalen Brunson to be making his shots. I mean, if you cannot survive both of that and be all right. I mean, the thing is with the Knicks, I like the fact that they're actually pretty deep, and that's one of the reasons why I actually gave them a good chance, and I actually was pretty comfortable with them playing the Cavs. Was I think they're a deeper team than Cleveland. I kind of think to a degree they can be deeper than Miami, but if your star players are not going to, that's a tall order for everybody else. And now you start and again, this second round. Don't get me wrong, this has been a successful season. If the Knicks get swept by Miami, to me, it's been a successful year.
Mm-hmm.
Because now you've got your guy in Brunson. You've got that guard that you have been looking for the last 20 to 30 years. He's there.
Mm-hmm.
RJ Barrett, who had a tough regular season, has stepped up in the last couple of weeks of the season into the postseason. He's been great. You've got Toppin, you've got Quigley, you've got Josh Hart, a very under the radar trade deadline pickup, and he has flourished. I mean, he's been fantastic. Played 47 minutes in the clinching game against Cleveland. Mitchell Robinson, very solid player, especially on the defensive glass. So the pieces are there. That's why I wasn't in love with going after Mitchell, because I would have had to give up valuable players to get a Donovan Mitchell. Not knocking Mitchell, but let's also remember too, Mitchell didn't really play that great in the closing games against the Knicks. So the Knicks held him in check, and we'll see if they can do this here against Miami. I mean, that game one though was it was tough because you come off a very good first half, and then the second half it was pretty much all Miami. You couldn't make a shot. Miami was able to make theirs, and even dealing with a banged up Butler, and they stole game one at MSG, which is the makings of a good team. You win one game on the road and take home court advantage. So we'll find out where the Knicks can do. Tuesday, game 3 not until Saturday, so a little bit of a rest period there. But to go over some unbelievable feats in the opening round, and we talk about how great these NBA playoffs have been. Hank, you've got to talk about Steph Curry. I mean,
my gosh, he was fantastic.
Now, this is the thing I said about this series against the Sacramento Kings. Now, did Golden State catch a break? I guess you could say that with the De'Aaron Fox injury, but at the same time, when you look at this series, and if this got later on, this was a case of a young, inexperienced team, even though with the coach of the year, Mike Brown and the Sacramento Kings, facing a squad in Golden State that's been down this road time and time again. And, with Curry, with Draymond Green, with Thompson. I mean, they've been down this road before, Steve Kerr coaching. And what Steph Curry's able to do is put together one of the best performances in NBA playoff history with a 50-burger in Game 7, as the Warriors actually were able to do something that they had a very tough time during the regular season, and that was win a game on the road.
Well, guess what? That's why you throw out the regular season stuff.
Yeah, even in the NBA you can do that. But this
and
year,
by the way, can I give you a fun fact about Steph Curry's performance?
Yeah, go for it.
Only 2 players in NBA history have scored 200 points in a 7-game series at age 35 or older. Steph Curry and Michael Jordan. That's it. That's the list.
Wow. That is something.
And it's yet another signature performance in his already impressive career. And this is another game where you could probably elevate his spot if you were to make, say, a pyramid a la Bill Simmons, if you know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably, in my personal opinion, I think Steph Curry might actually be in my top 10 with regards to pyramids. I mean, generally speaking, I don't really like comparing like the greatness of a lot of players just because I feel like every legend was great in their own way, but I would definitely say that Steph Curry is in my top 10 because look how much he's elevated the Warriors and look at how he's revolutionized the NBA with his 3-point shooting prowess.
Well, it's so funny you just said that, because I was going to say, if you want to talk about putting him on a list of the most influential players in NBA history, Curry is going to be and this is not a reach, he is going to be in the top 10 because he has changed the
Oh,
way the NBA has
no
played.
question.
Now, you want to tell me that this was really more of the Suns with Mike D'Antoni? Maybe, but Steph Curry's the way he shoots the ball and his accuracy and stuff, and some of these, unbelievable shots that he gets off, something that we don't ever see. And it's changed the game because now you see all these teams hoisting threes like it's nothing. And that really is a product of Curry. And you could say that's a good thing or a bad thing because of the way that the game has changed. I mean, I think it's a historical thing, but it has kind of, changed the dynamic that the NBA has been. But yeah, and it's just, we were talking in the Western Conference, Golden State and the Lakers, the two teams that maybe you wonder how many more runs they have, and then with the group that they have right now, Golden State with Curry, Thompson, and Green, the Lakers with LeBron and AD, and now they're going to meet each other. It's going to be great. It's going to be an absolutely fascinating. I cannot wait to watch this series. This is going to be one series that I'm going to be glued into, maybe on no sleep, but I will be paying attention. And speaking of those Lakers, getting past Memphis, and not only getting past them, but eliminating them with a dominant clinching win. And when we did our NBA preview when I was with Tom on ETB a couple of weeks ago, I pointed to these two series as series that could be upsets in the makings here. Because again, we talk about those seeds, like we say how Miami in the Eastern Conference is an 8 seed and number only. I could say the same thing about the Lakers and Golden State. And look at what LA did. Now, sometimes timing is everything too, because Memphis has not been the same team since the Ja Morant. And Morant then in the playoffs does these unbelievable like acrobatic moves and injures himself some more and becomes pretty much a non-factor. You have the Dillon Brooks situation with Memphis that's just also took over that series and just.
I'm sorry, the Grizzlies absolutely deserved to lose this series. I need to rant about a few things here. Now, don't worry, my bigger rants are coming. I'm keeping those.
You're building it up, Hank. You're building it up.
But there's a few takeaways I have from this series. Anthony Davis was the biggest reason why the Lakers won this series, in my opinion. Want proof? Look at the defensive shooting charts of the Memphis Grizzlies in Game 6. And by the way, is it safe to say that myself and Tom Albano owe him an apology for our little Angela Del Vecchio comment in one of our previous episodes of this show?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry. I know it was funny, but like for him to have that great of a series, I'm willing to, as was said at the end of Dirty Dancing, when I'm wrong, I say I'm wrong. But let me talk about Dillon Brooks. I mean, this guy is a clown. I mean, he goes up and like talks down to LeBron like he's nothing. Don't ever disrespect a legend like that when you're about to play him in a 7-game series, because all you are doing is essentially pouring gasoline into his fire. And what does LeBron do? He pretty much plays like typical LeBron James. Oh, but better yet, if this were like the only problem I had with Dillon Brooks, then you wouldn't see me going as much into rant mode. However, with that being said, oh boy, after that 40-point blowout in Los Angeles, the dude just acts like a sore loser and a big crybaby. Not only does he not shake LeBron James' hand, he just straight up goes in the locker room and tries to avoid media responsibility. Hey, Dillon Brooks, I've got a big message for you. Don't start something you can't finish. That's about all I got to say. And apparently it turns out that the Grizzlies said that he's not going to be back. Well, hey, look, good riddance. If you're a Grizzlies fan, you got to be saying good riddance to that clown.
Yeah, Shams posted on Tuesday that the Grizzlies.
So what did we learn here? Do not talk trash to your opponent if he happens to be one of the NBA legends. Don't start something you can't finish. And last but certainly not least, karma is a bitch.
So Shams reported on Tuesday that the Grizzlies informed Brooks, who's an unrestricted free agent this offseason, that he will not be brought back under any circumstances. And Brooks was told about the Grizzlies' decision to move on in exit meetings with team officials in recent days. And they discussed in exit meetings that it's best for both sides to have a fresh start. That is from Shams over at the Athletic. So there you go. So the Grizzlies, who have to figure out what's going on with Morant, maybe going in a very interesting direction here. So that's you're right. It's if you can't back it up, it's ultimately what's going to happen. So it'll be Lakers, and I'll tell you that might be my favorite series of the second round. I mean, they're all great series, but Lakers and Warriors, and I'd love to see that series go 7.
Bay Area versus
if I had to put
SoCal,
something on, what's that?
LA versus San Fran. You love to see it.
Well, not only is it Lakers Warriors, LeBron versus Steph. I mean, that's a series. That's a matchup that we've seen in the postseason a lot, and it's actually one that has favored Curry a lot more than LeBron. Even though LeBron, I think, has outscored Curry. I think he's averaging like 7 more points a game, or 7 or 8 more points per game. But Curry has 8 more wins in those head-to-head matchups in the playoffs. So, I mean, and I have to give the Warriors, I think, the advantage. I mean, I think the Lakers, LeBron and AD, the thing is, and I was going to bring this up too, they're healthy. That's the thing. These guys, either whether it's load management or, they have been dealing with injuries, now they're healthy, and that's a great thing to see. But as much as I don't want to disrespect the Lakers here, but I just think the Warriors have, I was telling people, if they got in, and they're together, I think the Warriors are going to go for one more shot. Now, I still believe, though, at the end of the day, I think Denver is still the team to beat in the West, and especially with them up 2-0 right now over the Suns. And if Nikola Jokic is going to go off for 30 and 10 every game, I mean, how do you stop that? You just had them against the Suns in Game 2. They were able to shut down Jamal Murray, but Jokic goes for 39 and 16. It's like, and again, you look at the Phoenix Suns, and again, you look at Chris Paul, hurt again in the postseason. So I don't see how Phoenix is going to come back and make this a series at all. This series might get done sooner rather than later. I think I even thought before the series had started, I had 5.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
The curse of CP3. It is real.
I mean, you hate to think it like that, but with all the injuries that he's had in the playoffs, it's hard not to.
I mean, I feel bad for the guy, but I had to say it.
Yeah, no, that's all fair. Yeah, so I think the Nuggets are going to get past the Suns in 5. I think it's going to be Lakers and Warriors in 7. I think it's going to be Warriors over the Lakers in 7. So this is their 5th playoff series meeting LeBron and Curry leads the first 4 3-1. But I wouldn't count out LeBron and AD too. I've said this at the same time. They're going to make one more run at this as well. But that's going to be a very fascinating series that got tipped off on Tuesday night over there in Golden State. But getting back to the East for just a minute here, the other series besides, we talked about Knicks Heat, but Celtics Sixers. How about this one where Philadelphia won on Monday night, 119-115, without Joel Embiid. And who stepped up? James Harden. So you talk about
Maxey was clutch.
Yeah. I mean, for all the talk about Harden's postseason struggles, I mean, he shut everybody up on Monday night. And now, Hank, this becomes very, very interesting because if Embiid does not, let's say he doesn't even play Game 2, although there was a report from Woj that there seemed to be more optimism about playing Game 2. If the Sixers, let's just say they win Game 2, 2-0 going back to Philly. That's a lot of pressure for the Celtics, who have not really been under that much pressure at all this season. And to me, the Celtics were almost like the Bruins, the clear favorite. See, to me, I thought the Bruins were the Celtics were a clear favorite more so than the Bucks in the East. But imagine them going back to Boston, going back to Philly, down 2-0. This all of a sudden becomes I'm going to say it here, a must-win game too for the Boston Celtics.
That's not a reach. You're supposed to protect your home court. To choke that way in front of your home fans. Now, Celtics should consider themselves lucky, because after all, it's game one, and after all, a certain tenant of their building did something pretty embarrassing, and don't you worry, I am going to make fun of that team. I mean, after all, I may or may not have a blog on them, but we'll get to them later.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, no, that was bad by the Celtics, but I'm not complaining.
Yeah, I mean, it now creates a must-win spot for them. And again, they were doing this without Embiid in game one. When that was the case, I have to tell you, I didn't give the Sixers a chance. And Harden stepped up, and backup center Paul Reed stepped up also, did well. I mean, that's what you need. Mm-hmm. So we'll find out here. Maybe you got to give Doc Rivers some credit there in Philadelphia, because the Sixers came prepared when let's be honest, I don't think anybody really gave him a chance in game one. And I'm not giving them much of a chance in the series, but tide turns now. I mean, Boston's in a must-win spot, and it's 2-0 going over to Philadelphia. I mean, that's quite some adversity that the Celtics would have to deal with, which they really have not had to deal with a lot in the 2022-2023 season. So you see how fascinating these NBA playoffs are, where the top seed in the East goes down to an 8 seed, which has only happened like 6 times. You've got now all of a sudden the Celtics, who were one of the clear favorites in the East, now down a game already. You've got the Knicks and the Heat, a rivalry of 25 to 30 years. And then in the West, you've got Lakers, Warriors, LeBron versus Steph, AD versus Thompson and Green. Steve Kerr going for another title. Darvin Ham, his first year there with the Lakers. I mean, that series is awesome. Got Nuggets with potential MVP in Jokic, even though I don't think he's going to win it. The awards were announced on Tuesday. But we've got Jokic and the Nuggets going up against the Suns. This is what the NBA needs. They need a product like this. For all the talk, the off the court stuff or the on the court stuff, the possibility that there was going to be a lockout. This is what makes the NBA great. Are these kind of matchups and these kind of star players showing up? This is NBA. This is the NBA that we all know and love.
Yeah, I agree. And remember that old slogan where amazing happens?
Yep, and we're seeing it this postseason.
No, this is one of the better NBA playoffs I've seen in a while.
And we'll find out as they carry on. Of course, they're just dragging on. It's funny. So Knicks and Heat played game 2 on Tuesday. Game 3 is not till Saturday. So that little drag. Wait till you get to the NBA Finals, Hank. It's like 3 weeks long. Although I do appreciate the NBA for at least trying to cater and care for us early bird risers in moving up the start times of the finals by a half an hour.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? It's not perfect, but it's better.
Yes.
So 8:30, maybe more like 8:45, be fine. It's better. It's not perfect, but it's better. So that's where we are when it comes to the NBA. And then there's the Stanley Cup playoffs. And again, wow. So Hank, where do you want to go here first? Do we want to put the Ranger misery out of the way, or do we want to get to one of the biggest upsets in the history of the Stanley Cup playoffs?
I have to get the Rangers rant off my chest.
That's all fair. Hank, the floor is yours. Maybe I should just stay out of this picture and we'll put you on the full screen and we'll give you the floor. But no, I'm just kidding. I'll share the screen with you. Go for it.
Oh boy. Where do I begin? Johnny, I'm going to say this right off the bat. And you can tell me all you want that I'm just saying something crazy and irrational in the heat of the moment. You can tell me that the wound is still fresh. You can tell me a lot of stuff. But here's my honest to God opinion. I have been a Rangers fan since the 2005-2006 season. Here's a laundry list of what I have dealt with. I remember the Rangers getting swept by the Devils in the very first playoff series I have ever watched. They got absolutely boat raced in that series.
I can attest to that. I was there.
I remember the 2007 series against Buffalo when Chris Drury tied that game with 7.7 seconds left. Ironically, he became a Ranger the next year, and ironically,
because of that moment.
Ironically, yeah. Fun fact, that was actually the last series the Buffalo Sabres won, but I digress. I remember many a time seeing them getting boat raced by the Penguins, although I've also seen some great wins against the Penguins too, so they kind of cancel each other out. I remember blowing 3-1 to the Capitals. I remember the other series against the Capitals 2 years later when Bruce Boudreau called out our fan base and we chanted, "Can you hear us?" And then they blew that 3-goal lead in game 4 of that series. I remember 2010 losing the last game of the regular season and missing the playoffs in the shootout against the Flyers because friggin' Olli Jokinen had to take the shootout. And I remember now I'm getting to the good stuff. 2012, 2014, and 2015. The 3 deepest runs in the Lundqvist era. Those all stung me. I was even stung last year's series after being up 2-0 against the Lightning. Shit, the 2017 series against Ottawa was pretty bad too. This was worse. This was by far the worst Rangers playoff loss in my lifetime. And Johnny, I see your expression. But Hank, this was a first round series. Why do you say that? Well, I'll tell you why. Look at the team the Rangers had around them. Chris Kreider, Vincent Trocheck. You acquired Patrick Kane and Vladimir Tarasenko. Mika Zibanejad. And good Lord, Artemi Panarin. I'm going to get to Artemi Panarin. Don't you worry. Because, good Lord, it's like he turned into Rick Nash on us. How many goals did he score this playoffs? 0.0. And we're paying this guy $11.5 million. And all he does during the playoffs is turn the puck over. What the hell? I'm sorry. That is absolutely unacceptable. And look, if you want to blame Gerard Gallant for the series loss, totally fair. I am not disagreeing. He is a great coach. He's one of the best Rangers coaches of my lifetime. And I'm not saying the Rangers need to fire him, but I am saying that seat that he's on is going to get warmer. In fact, I'm a big Gerard Gallant fan. But this is a guy who also has had a bad habit of not adjusting whenever things work out and teams figure him out. This was the same thing that happened last year against the Lightning, and it happened again this year against the Devils, and they figured out how to attack the Rangers in the power play. Look what happened. Other than that Game 6 outburst where they scored 5 goals, the Rangers only scored a grand total of 3 goals in the 4 losses. 3. That, with all the talent that they have on this team, is unacceptable. And Igor, the poor guy has been hung out to dry. Haven't I seen this before with Ranger goalies who seem to do better than the team around him? Henrik Lundqvist never had this much talent around him. We can't even get past the first round. And not to mention, you boat raced these guys the first 2 games. Both identical scores of 5-1 in their building. How does this happen? Make it make sense. But and look, the real game that was the turning point, in my opinion, was game 3. I mean, yeah, you're up 1-0, but this is when the power play started to rear its ugly head. This is where controversy started. Timo Meyer decides to do his best Pete Rose impersonation, and he barrels into Igor Shesterkin. And Igor gets upset, and reasonably so, decides to throw hands. Timo barrels into Igor, yet Igor gets the penalty for trying to defend himself. Make it make sense. But guess what? The Devils scored on that power play to tie the game. Now, before you think that I'm going to blame the refs for this series loss, absolutely not. Because it's not the refs' fault that the Rangers had a litany of turnovers in that game. It is not the refs' fault that our power play went 0 for 5. And it is certainly not the refs' fault that after blowing out a hated rival in 2 games on the road, if you want to call it that, because where the Devils play is technically in the New York, New Jersey tri-state area. But I digress. You can't take care of home ice in either of the 2 games. You don't get to complain about the refs because of that one incident in game 3. I'm sorry. And for the Rangers to have those missed opportunities early in game 7, I knew right then and there the series was done after Kane just couldn't score on that goal at the beginning of game 7. And I knew the series was done when they gave up that shorthander, and even after the Devils got that first goal. I was trying to convince myself, oh, it's not over, they can turn this around. Oh, no. I knew deep down they were dead, and and you know what the sad part is? Do you want to know another reason why I'm calling this the worst loss of my lifetime?
So you want to say worst loss since the lockout, post-lockout of 04-05,
Correct.
which is where you were starting at. Yeah,
I'm
just trying to take this all in, so go for it.
I could do a top 10 rainy day blog if I really wanted to be a masochist and bang my head against the wall for top 10 biggest what ifs in the not so illustrious near century history of the Rangers. And boy, there are plenty of them. This one has to be in the top 5 because the what if in this case is what if they won this game? You would have had to play a Carolina team that is absolutely banged up. And let me get this out of the way, by the way. They don't stand a chance in hell of beating the Devils. Like, I'm sorry. I know we're gonna have a little bit of a debate about this with another member of the brand later on. They're not beating the Devils. And look, I do want to say for the record, I'm not taking anything away from the Devils whatsoever. They were the better team in this series. They were hungrier. They did what they had to do. They made the necessary adjustments, and Lindy Ruff made the right decisions by switching to a young goaltender when Vitek Vanacek was struggling. Good for him. They absolutely deserve this win. The Rangers, with all the talent they had, should have been able to put away the Devils. They did not. And the Hurricanes are a team they could have easily mopped the floor with. And you know who else they could have mopped the floor? And who else was left? The Toronto Maple Leafs and the Florida Panthers. The road to the playoffs would have gotten significantly better because not only would you not have had to worry about the Boston Bruins, who were pretty much the team that you would have had to worry about had you gotten to the third round, possibly. That's what everyone's talking about. you wouldn't have had to worry about the Tampa Bay Lightning and their history of lengthy playoff success. But you pissed it away by no showing Game 7. And now we'll never know what they could have done had they simply won just one of the 2 home games at Madison Square Garden. And now you have question marks. What's going to happen in the offseason? Because there are a number of free agents. And you're not going to be able to keep Tarasenko and Patrick Kane because of salary cap. I don't envy Chris Drury whatsoever. And I don't think the window's closed. I still think they have another opportunity. But at the same time, the Stanley Cup playoffs are the most difficult tournament in all the 4 major sports to go through.
Yeah.
So I don't know how, if you're a Ranger fan, you're not going to feel devastated about this loss. I certainly am. And again, maybe, who knows? The Capitals won in 2018 with a team that seemed to be weaker than the other teams that didn't go as far. And do you want to know the other sad part? This was actually one of my favorite Ranger teams of all time. You didn't have any drama whatsoever. You had such a likable cast, and going to all those games this year and making so many memories was amazing. And I can go on and on about that, but
so I'm still trying to digest all of it.
It's just, I
think, the one thing that you hit on that now I'm starting to believe is when you look at the rest of the Eastern Conference that's left, and you see now it's Devils, Hurricanes, and the Hurricanes basically, like you said, are limping now into the second round. You don't have the Bruins in there. You've got the Panthers and the Maple Leafs, which is a very, very interesting series as well. The road definitely did look favorable. But I think what it comes down to, Hank, is this comes down to 2 things. Lindy Ruff outcoached Gallant, and the Devils players showed up. Their star players like Jack Hughes and stuff showed up, and the Ranger big guys did not. Outside of Kreider in the first couple of games, I mean, when you look at if you want to go by numbers, but he had 4 points. He was a -1. Zibanejad had 1 goal, was a -1. Panarin had 2 assists, was a -2.
How many goals did Panarin score again?
0. The Rangers, so they scored 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. They had 17 goals in the series, and 1/3 of them were by one player. And half the roster did not score. Just about.
And let me remind you again, this on paper is the deepest Rangers roster I will probably ever see.
So I had a partial season package, like half season package from 2005 to 2013. And I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. That first year was a very special year. That was the year with Jágr scoring the 54 goals.
Right. I remember.
Right. He got banged up towards the end of that season, and it clearly showed up. And I think the Rangers ran out of gas that year. The Devils were still very. So there was that. You listed all the negatives and the heartbreaks, but I mean, I think you also have to look at, the remarkable ride in some of these teams as well. At the same time, I mean, maybe this is not the right day to be doing this, because I know you're still very, very upset.
No.
If you wanted me to put it in perspective, we can go pre-lockout if you want, from 1998 to 2004.
Johnny, you're talking about a guy who would do anything to see his own 1994 in his lifetime. Remember, I was -2 when they last won.
I know that. I was 3 going on 4, and I had Knicks and Rangers. I was spoiled.
Like, do you have any idea how it's kind of starting to feel a little bit sad when I hear about 1994
Well, it's
because
30 years now.
like one of my other buddies who I was calling, who I called this morning, and he called me when I was on the way home. I've talked to him about football many a time. He's a big Jets fan.
Mm-hmm.
He tells me all the time how sad it is whenever they celebrate the Super Bowl III team.
Mm-hmm.
This is how I'm
Well,
starting to feel with the Rangers at this point. Like,
hey,
and like I said, I love that I've gotten to see great runs, but like at the same time, a successful team or a successful era is one that's like marked by a championship. I tend to agree with Brian Attard in that department.
yeah, and they've been to one Cup final, and that was the one against the Kings. But I mean, they've been consistent in making the playoffs every year. But sooner or later, you know what, you're going to have to take the next step. And this is something you're going to probably bring up when we get to the Bruins. Bruins are going to be a different team next year. So you wonder you wonder really where the strong point in the Eastern Conference is going to be. Could it be the Devils? Can they ride this because they've got such a young group of players there, like Jack Hughes, maybe
Johnny,
Schmidt.
I'm going to answer that question very, very quickly. Sorry to cut you off.
It's okay.
And again, you might think I'm saying this because I'm in a pissy mood. The Devils are going to make a deep run. Here's why I say that. Look at the talent they had compared to the Rangers. There's a reason why me and myself and Tom Albano were shitting our pants when it was announced that we were playing the Devils.
Mm-hmm.
Look who the Devils killed us because of speed.
Yeah.
Look at how the Pittsburgh Penguins won back-to-back cups. They did it because of speed.
Yeah.
And a backup goalie coming in and playing hero. Where have I seen that before? Oh, right. The 2016 Penguins with Matt Murray. Oh, right. The 2019 Blues with Jordan Binnington. Oh, and better yet, Cam Ward coming out of nowhere to lead the 2006 Carolina Hurricanes to their only Stanley Cup.
Yeah, this one might be a little bit more painful because this happened in the postseason. Binnington, I think, was during the season. So I do get that.
And I'm sorry, but do you want to know why? Another reason why I'm almost convinced the Devils are going to go on such a deep run and possibly even win the whole thing?
Well, I would imagine you look at the rest of the Eastern Conference, and are you really confident in any of those?
The only one that I would be remotely confident in is the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Okay.
That's about it. The Panthers, like, I'm sorry, but I still can't fathom how they beat the Bruins. I really can't. I think, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when we get to the Panthers-Bruins series.
Well, I mean, we can make that. Yeah, we can make that transition in just a moment.
And let's talk about that in a minute. Carolina Hurricanes, like I said, they did nothing at the trade deadline to fix their needs. Best they did was get Jesse Puljujarvi from the Edmonton Oilers. And now you're without two of your two really good forwards. Like I said, the Devils use speed as a weapon. They don't stand a chance at hell. I'm telling you that right now.
Yeah. I mean,
no chance at hell.
If you look at that goal they scored in overtime to beat the Islanders too. That was such a bad goal.
How the hell did Sorokin let that one in?
The guy who is one of the favorites for the Vezina. But yeah, Rangers off season is going to be fascinating. If I were to take a guess, Hank, I think my money would be on Tarasenko coming back. I think Kane is gone.
I would agree. As much as I love Patrick Kane, and I've been a fan of Patrick Kane since like he was in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
I will be the first to tell you that he's seen better. He's pretty much seen his best days. Like the only reason we got him for such a cheap deal was because of his hip.
Yeah, and he didn't look right in this series at all.
No, he didn't.
I kind of wonder if we're going to find out in the coming days that he was battling something.
Oh, those come out every single year. And speaking of players battling something, that'll be mentioned when I talk about the Bruins.
Well, that's where we'll transition into next, because obviously, when you talk about, when you look back at the first round of the playoffs, I mean, you have to look at some crazy upsets here. And obviously, the biggest one is one of the biggest upsets in the history of the Stanley Cup playoffs, as the Florida Panthers came back, or if you want to say the Bruins choked away, maybe you can say both. But I want to give the Panthers some credit, because they came back from 3 games to 1 down, overcame they jumped out to a 2-0 lead in game 7, saw the Bruins score 3 unanswered goals, and then in the last minute of game 7 in regulation, they scored to tie it up, and then 5 minutes into overtime, they win it, which is, again, when you look at the point differential of the two teams from the regular season to this, and you look at everything else, this is one of the biggest upsets in the history of the postseason. And
Oh no, Johnny, the biggest.
Yeah, I mean,
here's why I say it's the biggest. The Panthers, and pardon the pun, had to scratch and claw their way just to even make the playoffs. Like, there was talk that they were behind the Penguins for much of the season. The Penguins ended up, all the bad moves that Ron Hextall made finally caught up to them, and they ended up missing the playoffs for the first time since 2006, I want to say. And you look at the Panthers compared to the Boston Bruins, there is no reason on paper that they should have had any shot. The Bruins' talent level you could probably make the case that it was comparable to the 70s Habs. You had a goalie tandem of Ullmark and Swayman. You still had good members of the old guard who were contributing, such as Krejci and Bergeron and Marchand. You had David Pastrnak becoming the 5th active player to score 60 goals in a season. And you made a great trade with the Capitals to get Dmitry Orlov and Garnet Hathaway. That should have essentially, established them as invincible. Instead, not only do you blow a 3-1 lead, 3 of the games they lost were on home ice.
that's crazy.
That's embarrassing. And I'm sorry, but I'm starting to think that Jim Montgomery, that the Bruins kind of won in spite of him as their head coach, not so much because of him. Because he inherited a really good roster from Bruce Cassidy, who, fun fact, Bruce Cassidy won a playoff series this year with the Vegas Golden Knights. Montgomery is not really screwed this series up. Why on earth would you play Linus Ullmark when it's obvious he is battling health, he is dealing with injuries? Like, look at the reports that came out. He should not have been playing. That is negligence.
Mm-hmm.
If the Bruins didn't have that historic season, that could probably get him fired. That's a fireable offense. I'm not kidding.
It still could be.
And speaking of players with health issues, I feel horrible for Patrice Bergeron. His father is battling cancer. Like, I don't know if you remember, but he wanted to play that last game in Montreal just so that he could play in front of his father, who is very ill. And this is probably going to be his last rodeo, because it looks like he may retire after the season, because he took the 1-year contract just so he could have another shot at a cup.
Yeah.
He played that entire playoffs with a herniated disc.
That's
ow. But you want to know something else? I would also say that this series is karma. Do you remember when it was in the news what happened when the Bruins tried to sign Mitch Miller? Recall that Mitch Miller was the player that the Arizona Coyotes drafted, and he was the guy that was that got in trouble when he was a teenager for consistently bullying a young kid who not only was black, but he also had developmental disabilities.
I remember it.
The Arizona Coyotes had to rescind their draft pick of him because of all those circumstances. He also lost a scholarship to play at North Dakota State. The Bruins tried to give him a second chance, thinking, oh, we can get this guy on the cheap. He could help us. Only problem with that is, as much as I love the idea of giving someone a second chance for doing things that are dumb, he didn't exactly show remorse for the way he treated that young kid. In fact, that kid said that he tried to reach out to him, but he never showed him proof that he had changed his ways. And he did not want to forgive Mitch Miller, and understandably so. And when the boys club of Sweeney and what's his name, Cam Neely, released him, they tried to claim ignorance and, and say, oh, we didn't know about his character issues. No, you morons. That was widely known and reported when he was drafted. If that were true, then you just admitted that you were stupid. So fast forward months later, Bruins have that historic season. They choke. I'd like to think that was karma.
Could be. Yeah. And just to put a wrapper on this kind of, how we talk about teams winning the President's Trophy and how it's really not a lock for success in the playoffs. The last 10 President's Trophy winners, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Bruins in 2014, out in the second round. The Rangers in 2015, out in the conference finals. The Capitals in 16 and 17, both. The Nashville Predators in 2018, out in the second round. The Lightning in 2019, out in the first round.
Oh, they got swept.
Yep, they got swept. Even more so. The Bruins in 2020, second round, out. Avalanche in 2021, out in the second round. The Florida Panthers last season, out in the second round. And this year, the Boston Bruins, the best regular season in NHL history, out in the first round in epic fashion.
And guess what? This is a team that has had a history of choking failures. Just go back, and if you want to look at it with the 15 years, go back to 2009 when they won 50-plus games and then lost in overtime Game 7 to the Carolina Hurricanes. Yep. And if you want to see a pattern, they've lost a lot of home Game 7s. And it seems like the only way that they're not allergic to home Game 7s is when they play the Toronto Maple Leafs,
who have had their own thing, but we'll get to them in just a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Let me wrap up this thing with one question. Just do a little compare. What was worse, this or what the Milwaukee Bucks went through against the Heat?
This.
Yeah, I mean,
this easily.
It's unusual. It's rare in the NBA, but given how dominant the Bruins were in the regular season, and also, by the way, here's a fun fact: how many times in the regular season did the Bruins lose 3 games in a row? That's right. They lost 3 games in a row once this year, and it was in the playoffs, and it was in elimination. That just goes to show you sometimes the regular season, as I always say, just get in. Sometimes we've seen that with the Rangers. The Rangers make deep, not to bring it back to the Rangers, but the Rangers have made deeper runs as a lower seed, just getting in, than they did as a top seed. So just goes to show you, if you get hot at the right time, you look at the Panthers, who pretty much outshot and outscored their way. I mean, it wasn't like it was dominant goaltending. It was really just their forwards and did the job. And so the Florida Panthers move on. And as painful as it was for the Boston Bruins to get eliminated, it was equally as joyful for the Toronto Maple Leafs as they won a playoff series for the first time since 2004. And in years past, when they've blown big leads, whether it's been big leads in playoff games or big series, they returned the favor this year, Hank. In one of their games against the Tampa Bay Lightning, they came back from a 3-goal deficit to win a game. And maybe then you thought that maybe the tide has changed as the Toronto Maple Leafs win their first series in nearly 20 years and they move on to the second round. And you and I had spoken at the start of the season that we were not as high on the Tampa Bay Lightning this year as in years past. And I think we've seen it, whether it's been some movement of players or also just the fact that Vasilevsky just was not the same goaltender as he's been in years past. But give Toronto a lot of credit here. It's a great thing that the Maple Leafs are moving on here in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Well, I think another factor with the Lightning, and I talked to Garth about this a lot. He lives in Florida. He's a big Tampa Bay Lightning fan. He's said on multiple occasions that the problem with the Lightning this year was that they did not have as good of a fourth line in years past. They weren't quite as deep. And I think one of the big, and if you look at a lot of the patterns of moves that Julien Brisebois has made in the past few years for them, he would go out and add that big depth, like even if it would cost him a lot. Like I'll give you an example: Barclay Goodrow, who ironically is now with the Rangers.
Yep,
he gave up. It seemed like he gave up a lot for Goodrow, but they won back-to-back cups. So even if that's the case, you can't really argue with success there. Blake Coleman from the Devils is another example, and Brandon Hagel from the Chicago Blackhawks. And now this year, you had the Jeannot trade from the Nashville Predators. They gave up a shit ton to get Tanner Jeannot. However, this time, the law of averages may have caught up with them, and he was practically non-existent in the series. And I think the fact that their depth wasn't quite as good, I think that definitely had a factor in it. But with that having been said, I think there was something different about the Leafs because they got a guy like Ryan O'Reilly, who I met, by the way, outside of Madison Square Garden not too long ago. He's a super nice guy.
Nice.
And he's a leader too. He remember the experience he had with the St. Louis Blues was very valuable. And I really would have loved to have him as a New York Ranger, by the way. But he proved to be a really good acquisition for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And now you finally got a playoff series win for guys like Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, and William Nylander, all of whom were practically in elementary school the last time the Leafs even won a playoff series. And by the way, do you want to know a really crazy fact? Sheldon Keefe, the head coach of the Leafs, is the only living Leafs coach to have won a playoff series.
Wow. Yeah. That's an amazing fact. I know you were talking to me about that in our pre-show discussion. So pretty great ride there by the Leafs. So in the Eastern Conference, you're going to have Maple Leafs and Panthers and Hurricanes, Devils. And then just to real quick about the Western Conference, you've got the Golden Knights and the Oilers, and you've got the Seattle Kraken and the Dallas Stars. And how about the Kraken real quick, taking out the defending Cup champion Avalanche?
Here's the thing about that series. That was a really weird one because the Avalanche really had a lot of bad breaks. I mean, due to injuries and whatnot, because they lost Gabriel Landeskog for the season and very possibly his career. Like, I don't want to get fully into it, but look how severe he was playing with a severe injury for the past few years and a half. He might very well be done. And if that's the case, that's a very tough blow, losing your team leader. They also lost some of their key guys from last year to the salary cap tax, which was pretty much expected. Every team goes through that. And then you had Cale Makar miraculously only getting a 1-game suspension for a dirty hit that he had. And if you look at the Seattle Kraken, they were a sneaky deep team. Even with Jared McCann getting injured on the Cale Makar hit, they still got a goal from so many of their players. Not too many of them had multiple goals. They really won this series because they had a lot of depth. but I think the bigger reason as to why Seattle won their first playoff series ever was not just because of the depth that they had from a lot of unsung heroes. Because remember, Matty Beniers was their star player. He didn't even have a great series. Philip Grubauer stole the show. And isn't that amazing, Susan, that Philip Grubauer was a goalie who just a year ago and for most of the season was pretty much Swiss cheese. As in, he couldn't stop a goal to save a puck to save his life. And this was the same guy that Colorado lost a couple years ago to the expansion draft.
Mm-hmm.
He goes out and, gets some payback on his old team. So I think that was another, big storyline for the Kraken. And not to mention, the Colorado Avalanche, just like the Boston Bruins, lost 3 home games.
Yeah. And Hank, I'll even, just to wrap up the first round discussion here, here's an amazing fact. We talked about the road teams, how winning these games. Visiting teams went 31-19 to set an NHL record for most road wins in a single round.
Mm-hmm.
6 of the 8 series were clinched on the road.
Mm-hmm.
Game 7 on the road. Sometimes when you have these kind of even matchups, venue doesn't matter. And I think in the NHL, with the amount of parity that there is in the league, the home ice maybe does not mean as much as, we say home court is a huge deal. Ultimately, talent is a big thing. Of course, just don't tell the Bucks that. But you've got that, Stanley, NFL single elimination, MLB, kind of the same thing. You know what? Pitching ultimately does it. You never know. Hitting, we're looking at the home court, home ice, home field, whatever you want to say, and it maybe doesn't mean as much as it has before.
By the way, do you want to know another fun fact?
Sure.
The Carolina Hurricanes last won a cup in 2006.
Yep.
They have the most recent cup out of all the teams left playing in the playoffs.
Wow. That is amazing. That's right. Yeah, because you've got the Kraken and the Golden Knights, who obviously have not won one yet. And by the way, that would be an awesome Western Conference final if that could be.
I would love that.
I don't think it's going to be, though. Actually, I think it's going to be the other way.
You want to talk about a really epic series, and I was talking about this with Jennifer too. We both really are going to be excited to watch the Dallas versus Seattle series. That one's going to go the full 7.
Yeah.
I'm really convinced of that.
Yeah. See, I have it though the other way. I think it's going to be the Oilers and the Stars in the West.
Oh, okay. Well,
I mean, the Oilers
I think Dallas is going to probably end up winning that series, and ultimately, I think Dallas is another team that's sneaky good, by the way.
I agree with you.
I think Dallas might come out of it in the West, but I would say it's going to come down to either Dallas and Edmonton. I happen to agree with you, but with that having been said, I would not be surprised if Vegas somehow pulled it off against Edmonton.
Edmonton was my team in the West all season. I'm going to continue to ride with them until they give me a reason not to. So I have that. And in the East, I'm taking the Maple Leafs over the Panthers, and I am going with the New Jersey Devils over the Hurricanes. And Hank, it's exactly the reason you just said. I think the Hurricanes are banged up. I think the Devils are fast. Their youth is a big deal. You just wonder, can Schmidt continue this ride in the playoffs? But I think against this kind of Carolina team, which is limping its way down the stretch here, I think he can. So that's what I'm going to go with here in the second round. But you know what? These playoffs in both the winter sports, the NBA and the NHL, have been absolutely fascinating to watch. One of our teams is still going on. Hopefully continues to make a deep run. The other one, unfortunately, is out. But nevertheless, if you like sports, if you like action, I know people that are not even hockey fans down here in South Carolina. You know what? They watch it this time of the year because it is just that wild and that wide open. So we'll see what happens here as the playoffs go on. And obviously, football season continues to get closer and closer, and baseball season, we're a month in. We were going to talk about the Yankees today, but I got to tell you, is it really worth it, Johnny? They're
there's a reason why I haven't really been watching many Yankee games, and I'll save that Yankee rant for another day.
Well, I will tell you what, when we get to Memorial Day, I always say that Memorial Day is like the first checkpoint of the Major League Baseball season. And look, the first month of the year in baseball, you do have some great stories. You have the Pirates, the Rays, those are great stories. But I think the best thing to do when it comes to baseball is check back in about Memorial Day and see where your teams are at and go from there. That's really it, because it's such a long season, and things can change in an instant. So we will definitely touch on baseball on the field the month of May and into the summertime as well. And so that's what you have to look forward to. But while we have these great playoff runs happening in both winter sports, we will definitely be diving that in each and every week. And of course, football seems to never take a week off. It's become the 24/7, 365 a year sports. So we'll be on top of that. I like horse racing. You got the Kentucky Derby happening this weekend. So if we have another crate, we may touch on that next week as well. So stay tuned for that. But that's going to put a wrap on episode 52 of Game On. Look at that. Nice long show once again. Not the 4.5 hours that we did for the live stream of the NFL draft, but nevertheless, a nice show with a little bit of everything. So,
good way to top out the CC Sabathia episode.
That's absolutely right. Yes. Or, David, if you want to go back to 96, David Weathers, or if you want to go to, 03, Jose Contreras. Yeah. But we'll keep it at CC. But if you like today's episode, folks, leave us a like. If you're new to the Empty the Bench Podcast Network, hit that subscribe button. And of course, have your notifications set so you know when all of our programming is going to be coming out. You'll have Nick and Tom back together on Thursday for Empty the Bench at 3 p.m. Of course, check out Tom and Zan over there at the MMA Outsiders, which actually preceded us again this week. We should be back on Tuesday next week. But again, have your notifications set and follow us on social media at Game On ETB on Facebook and Twitter, and Game On _ECB on Instagram, so you know when we're going to be back. But we should be back next Tuesday at 7 p.m. And of course, you got Hank and Jen with their show, which I'm actually on. So check that out as well on social media. We'll put that out there as well, and all of our great content here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. So, folks, for Hank and Indictor, I'm Johnny Montalbano. Enjoy your week, everybody. Enjoy the baseball. Enjoy the Stanley Cup playoffs. Enjoy the NBA playoffs, the Kentucky Derby, good stuff. And we'll catch you again next week.